House Energy Policy Committee will come to order. I know. We need a tech guy to fix it. Mr. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Glenn.
Here.
Representatives Hout.
Here.
Barrett.
Here.
Cole. Tedder.
Here.
Bellino.
Here.
Farrington.
Here.
Griffin. Johnson.
Here.
LaFave.
Here.
Lauer.
Here.
Riley.
Here.
Lisinski.
Here.
Deonda. Garrett. Camilleri. Elder.
Here.
Green.
Here.
Sneller.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting. Representative Tedder so moves. Without objection, so ordered. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have a hearing today on the cutoff policies for utilities. Cutoffs, we mean cutting off power, under what circumstances they do that. There are various reasons. We know that two that have been outlined by the Public Service Commission are billing errors, and in particular, a lot of the focus today is going to be on DTE because it's gotten a lot of attention. But billing errors being at the top of the list, and also people's discomfort with the installation of smart meters. Representative Cox and Representative Tice couldn't be with us today, but I know that they have constituents who are extremely concerned about this. Please let me make clear at the beginning, the committee has heard two different 90-minute sessions of testimony on smart meters. It is not the intention, my intention, that this be a third hearing on smart meters, even though I understand that that is the basis on which some of you have been threatened to have your power cut off, or maybe you'll testify that it was in fact cut off. But the focus today is on the process by which they decide to cut you off, even if you've paid your bills. That means that if smart meters is the reason you got your power cut off, certainly no reason for you not to, for you to fail to mention that. But the focus of the hearing is not on smart meters in particular, except as one of several reasons that you might have a fully paid bill and still be facing the threat of having your power cut off. Our first witness, and by the way, this is going to be a one-sided hearing at the request of DTE. They've asked not to testify today. The Public Service Commission has ordered them to come up with a report as to how they've been handling these shutoffs, a lot of them in southeast Michigan. I believe the deadline is sometime later this month. So DTE has asked specifically for the opportunity to testify and provide the results of their report on January 30th, if I believe that's correct. The first witness we're going to have today, we're making a medical accommodation for. And so is Ms. Chimner already in the building? Ma'am, if you would come forward, please. Identify yourself, push the red button, and then we will allow you to depart as you need. Following Ms. Chimner is going to be Senator Pat Colbeck, who has delved pretty deep into this issue and has been in communication with the PSC. So, Ms. Chimner, if you would. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Press the red button and then please proceed.
Thank you. My name is Jaime Chimner. I'm from Sheboygan. I left at 4 o'clock this morning to be here because I feel it's very important. Consumers also needs to be looked into on these matters because they're doing the exact same thing and they're just as guilty. And I'm a consumer's customer. I was cut off on September 11th of 2015 because I had 5 doctor's letters saying that a smart meter or digital meter would severely harm me health-wise. Mr. McKee came to my house. He called us September 10th, 2015 and said, I'm coming up to talk to you all about this meter problem. And he came up. I said, you're welcome to come up. We're having a public meeting that we arranged, so you're welcome to come to it. And he did. And in front of all of those people, he said, if you don't take this digital meter, I'm going to come shut off your power. And I said, what? I thought we were discussing it. He said, I'll be over tomorrow morning. I said, no, you'll be over tomorrow afternoon when I'm ready for you to be there. That morning, my husband and friends made about 35 to 50 phone calls finding someone to help us. They were threatening to shut me off a permanently disabled woman's electricity. I couldn't use my medical equipment, and it's still shut off. They're still sending me letters saying, we welcome you back. Please come back. But I have to have an analog meter. So they cut me off because I couldn't, for my life, have an analog meter, have a smart meter or a digital meter. I was given 13 hours notice that they were going to cut our power because I would not accept a digital or smart meter. But yet, they'll go to my neighbors and say, if you don't take the smart meter, we'll cut your power like we did to your neighbors. What gives them the right to do that? Why do we live in a world where this smart meter program was supposed to be voluntary when it first started? We were supposed to volunteer to get it. We didn't have to get it. Well, now I'm proof that you have to get it or they'll cut your power. It doesn't matter what you have, what reasons. They just smile at you and terrorize you. And he terrorized me that day when he came to shut off our power. I begged him. I begged this man not to shut my power off. I had machines I have to use to live. But if my power hadn't been shut off, I wouldn't be here right now. I was 2 days probably within dying. So I guess I have to thank consumers for shutting off my power because I'm so much healthier now. But doggone it, these people are doing it not just to me, but DTE is doing it and consumers is doing it too. And you may not hear about it up in northern Michigan because me and a few people seem to be the only ones up there working on this for the people downstate also. And I'm so grateful to them. And I'm grateful to this committee for listening to me. But what they did is wrong. They can't just cut someone's power off. I've never been late on a bill. I've always been very friendly. I'm a very friendly person. I don't break the law. That's not what I do. And they treated me as if I was a criminal because I had documentation that begging them not to cut my power. I think this is beyond cruel and unusual punishment for anyone to have to go through. It's for an illegal electric shutoff. I have to suffer. Oh, my third winter. I'm cold. Please do the right thing and pass the meter choice bill, or I'm not going to have a choice, and I won't be here much longer if that goes on my house. Thank you very much.
Ms. Chimner, I have a question, two questions. What's been the source of your power, if any, since it was cut off?
So we have generators that were donated to us.
Okay.
We just got solar panels. We had to buy, because our furnace was run by electric, we had to go out and buy, which we couldn't afford, natural gas radiating heaters. And a lot of batteries. We go through a lot of batteries.
Ma'am, what is your understanding, if you have any legal requirement by the utilities to take into account your medical condition? And I don't mean your condition in response to smart meters. I mean whatever other medical condition you might have, like some people have at-home dialysis, somebody have pacemaker.
I do have machines for my asthma that I have to run. I have an special air cleaner I'm supposed to run 24/7 that I can't run. I have 2 of them.
Was there any discussion by consumers as to acknowledging your medical conditions that?
Oh, they acknowledged them. They just weren't going to help me live without what they wanted to give me.
Okay, Representative Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned you're running some natural gas heat in your house. Is that combined on the separate meter? I mean, I guess I thought they combined smart meters to run both natural gas and electricity. You're saying they're separate?
We have DTE for gas and we have consumers for electric.
Okay.
DTE came up. We didn't even have to contact them. They came and put an opt-out sticker on our gas meter. And we didn't even ask them.
Okay.
And I thought we were going to have to battle them too, but so far
So you have the analog meter for gas and,
No, we have consumers for electric, and DTE runs our gas.
uh-huh.
I live in the city of Sheboygan, and that's how I have natural gas and water, or we'd be in bigger trouble.
No, I understand. I'm just saying the way they measure your gas consumption, though, is on a analog meter.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative Lauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the meter that you have for the gas, is it an analog or is it an opt-out? Because you said opt-out meter, so I'm just trying to understand, is it the digital opt-out or is it actually analog?
It's an analog meter.
It's analog. What's wrong with the digital opt-out meter? What issues does that cause, or could you have that meter?
No, that was a meter that was on my house actually for 6 years, and we didn't realize it. It affects my health.
In what way?
It paralyzed me after 6 years and finally figuring out what was on our house when the smart meters were coming. I was paralyzed from the waist on down most days. I was homebound in a wheelchair by that point, not given a whole lot of time left if we couldn't find what was causing my problem.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for Ms. Chimner? If not, ma'am, thank you for your testimony. Appreciate you taking the long drive down.
It was worth it. Thank you.
You bet. And we're going to show a video clip because this issue has gotten quite a bit of attention. Hopefully it's not going to take too long. Let's thank you. Okay, out of respect for Senator Colbeck's time, I'm going to ask our tech to continue to work on it and get it to the point where we know it's going to work. But in the meantime, I'm going to ask Senator Pat Colbeck to come to the table. You know the drill, Senator. Appreciate your research on this issue.
If you don't mind, I'll be joined by my staffer, Greg Ostrander.
Yes, sir. Please proceed.
Well, I think as we just, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it, committee personnel, our representatives, for the opportunity to go off and share some of our experiences in our office. I think with the previous incident here, we have ample evidence that sometimes digital systems don't work as well as analog systems. So I really want to kind of highlight today that we're talking about a topic that talks about or deals with a very unique responsibility that we have as legislators. Prior to us serving, it was deemed necessary that we would have a regulated utility market in Michigan for electricity. We don't have these types of discussions that we're going to have here today around where you buy your gas. We don't have these discussions about where you buy your groceries, because that is on a free market. We don't have a free market here. Previous representatives determined that it's in the public interest that we should have a regulated utility market. And so as part of that public interest, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that the services that are delivered as a result of this decision are done so that they do indeed represent the public interest of those we serve. Now, today what I'd like to do is share some observations that we've made in regards to the shut-off practices, but also I want to talk a little bit, if I may, Mr. Chair, about the restoration practices, because it's not just a matter of what the process by which they shut them off, but it's also also the process by which they're restored. So, and I come from a district where our electricity is delivered primarily by DTE, so we'll be focusing on some observations around DTE service. And I should also point out that we do appreciate the recent actions by the MPSC to drill down on this issue a little bit more in depth, but obviously, and you're going to see from this testimony, that further action is necessary. So today what we're going to talk about is the fact that, number one, DTE didn't follow multiple rules that are already established. Number two, ratepayers inappropriately were shut off. Plus, it took a long time for the power to be restored. There's multiple rules that need to be reformed in addition to the ones that were not adhered to. And current utility reporting is not sufficient to detect the actual problems, ensure faster restoration, and allow for sufficient oversight. So once again, don't want to forget about the fact that we got to talk about restoration, not just shut off. All right. So power is required by rule to be restored in the same day after the first working day, but allows for exceptions, such as except for reasons beyond its control. Clearly, that's fairly open-ended statement. The reality from my office experience is that there are many people waiting 5 days or longer because of a multi-step process to restore power and due to delays. So we need to define what is beyond control. So some of the specific rules that need to be reformed are: let people who want to simply pay their bills and keep an analog meter keep their power. And I know you're a big advocate of that, and we testified earlier in support of House Bill 4220, which has provisions that would lead towards that. Number two, we need to enforce that shutoff notices occur and are documented in writing. And a lot of these notices that we're getting, or a lot of anecdotal stories we're hearing, is that there is no written notice, and it's done via verbal assessments, and Ms. Chimner actually just kind of corroborated that in her recent testimony. Number three, you can't prematurely shut off power. It's not to be used as a weapon. I'm not a big fan of bullies. Number four, you need to clarify that wanting to keep an analog meter is not a safety violation. We've had these meters in place for decades. They've worked effectively without any problems. There's a lot of cases to be made that the smart meters themselves, whether they're put in dumb mode, if you will, or turned off for the emissions, or whether or not they're actually fully functional, represent more of a hazard than the previous analog meters. Number five, we need to honor the intent and purpose of the Senior Protection Program, and we do need penalties for violations. And number six, new computer systems should not be rolled out before they are ready. Case in point. All right, so the current reporting in particular is not sufficient because, number one, under Rule 33, utilities currently report the number of shutoffs to the MPSC. This does not provide sufficient detail to identify the reason for these shutoffs or how long it took to actually restore the power. We need oversight, and that can't occur without sufficient data around shutoffs and restoration practices. We also need to have some ratepayer input. Many who contacted my office felt that they had trouble lodging a formal complaint with the state, so we're not serving their public interest, if you will, and we need to do a better job. If we're going to take on the job of regulating these utilities in the context of what is in the public interest, then we have to be interested in the public. And sometimes they told me that they could not file a complaint or actually leave their information. So, and we know government can be complex at times, and so we don't need to make that unduly complex. So, some key questions I think we should all be asking is, number one, how can the state detect problems faster? Number two, how can ratepayers be better accommodated? Shutoffs should not be a common practice. And number three, what ramifications for utility exist when rules are broken, and how many ratepayers are actually made whole? Ratepayers in Michigan can't vote with their feet because of our regulated utility market. So we have to do better, and we have to assume responsibility for that customer service because we're the ones that are focused on making sure that they don't have choice and the ability to go off and walk with their feet like you can when you have a gas station with the prices too high, or when you have a oil service place that's not where you want, or you got a grocery store that's not carrying the goods that you want. You have choice in those cases. We do not have choice when it comes to electricity. And I just ask for your support in looking at legislation and looking for that affects some of the rule changes that we're talking about, and holds MPSC accountable and holds utilities accountable for actually abiding by these rules. So without further ado, just open it up for any questions you may have, Mr. Chair.
Senator and members of the committee, PSC, and I think you provided me a copy, but the PSC issued some kind of statement in the last several weeks that outlined all the different reasons for cutoffs, but they don't ask how many of each one takes place. So just be aware that I've asked DTE when they testify on January 30th to provide that information.
Good.
And obviously PSC, so we can quantify it. Also, is the senior citizens policy referred to, is that the one that deals with various medical conditions, or is that a separate set of
I believe
standards?
it's separate, so it's November to what, April? There's a moratorium.
So between the dates of November 1st and March 31st, if a person that lives there is age 65 or older, they are not supposed to be turned off for any reason. I believe part of the history is that goes back to 7 years ago when there was that gentleman who tragically died up in Bay City. And you have to take into account seniors. They may be living by themselves. They have multiple health issues. And it was interesting when November came and our office received calls from people that were age 65 or older and were saying that DTE was threatening to turn them off. And we did have people that were age 65 and older that did indeed get shut off. And there was even some confusion initially within the MPSC that the senior protection program only applied to people who couldn't pay their bills. Well, first of all, it's just nonsensical, because if we're trying to make sure that seniors aren't dying for no valid reason, the fact that they can't pay their bills versus it being another reason really doesn't make the point. Now, Chairman Talberg did clarify later that also AMI shutoffs should not happen to people age 65 or older between the dates of November 1st and March 31st. But again, why DTE was not able to follow that rule correctly, we don't know. As the investigation that was opened up by the MPSC on December 20th showed, DTE's new computer system appeared to have lots of glitches, so we don't know if they didn't know the person's age. Sometimes it appeared within DTE, one hand didn't know what the other hand was doing. Somebody would hear that they're safe, and then a couple weeks later they get a knock on the door saying that we're going to shut you off. So it was a very confusing time that took a few months to clarify. We hope that DTE right now is not sending notices or shutting off people that are age 65 or older, but I received 3 emails yesterday that sound like they still are that I need to investigate. So that's an example of one of the rules that doesn't appear to be getting followed, and you know, we have people age 65 or older that our office has been talking to. They were without power for 5, 6, 7 days. It's cold. We're really blessed that we have not had of another tragedy like what happened in Bay City.
Sir, did we get your name for the record?
My name is Greg Ostrander.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Yeah, PSC's statement a couple of weeks ago was listing all the various reasons based on their investigation. Non-payment, obviously, but I think what we're hearing from mostly today are people who have paid and have been cut off. But PSC found also meter tampering. Maybe that's the category under which they include smart meters. Theft, moving in or out, and not getting proper authorization when you occupy a new dwelling, or emergency safety hazards called by police and fire, computer glitches, and the new program, the new billing program, billing errors are all the various reasons. But we don't know what percentage falls into each, but we have asked DT to provide that to us.
One quick point that was interesting from the initial U-case filing that was done, DTE, according to the MPSC, did inappropriately shut off 288 families. That's what we know as a baseline. The procedures were not followed in 288 cases. So we don't know exactly how all of those are going to be broken down, and hopefully we'll get that. But 288 is a big number. From the hearing I attended at the MPSC on December 20th, and I don't know if somebody from the MPSC will be testifying today, but there were, for example, people that either weren't getting billed or were on the the program where they get the equal amount every month, and it's kind of out of their mind that the system was showing them as not having paid, and they were just cut off without notice. And the safety issue, or the so-called meter tampering, what that appears to come down a lot is the people that do put a bar or a lock over their meter. And the way the MPSC has changed some rules, they are now trying to categorize that as a safety violation. And it just seems very nonsensical that a bar over a meter, that a desperate person like maybe the Chimners is just trying to keep their analog meter on there until a bill like HB 4220 can be passed, can somehow be deemed as meter tampering or doing something unsafe. And turning the power off to a person in the middle of winter, that's what's unsafe.
I know that I attended a wind energy meeting in Lapeer County a couple of months ago, and 3 different people that one night handed me their letters, their threat letters from DTE. Don't know whether or not they eventually got cut off or not. How exactly is the power cut off? Is it as simple as flipping a switch? I had a lady with me in the elevator who said they brought a lift truck and they physically cut the line at the pole out on the street.
Yes, yeah.
So typically with the calls that we're getting, and certainly with AMI now, for where it is rolled out, if there is a computer glitch and the computer shows that they've not paid when maybe they have or they haven't been billed, that power can just be cut off remotely. For the people that have been dealing with the AMI shutoffs.
What is AMI?
Advanced Metering Infrastructure.
Okay, thank you.
For the people, though, that have been cut off at the pole, that's where the restoration in particular has been very problematic, because the typical scenario that our office has seen as people have contacted us is they get cut off at the pole. They usually take a day to be in the cold before they decide they need to capitulate. They really want to keep that analog meter. But I tell you, you try living without power in the cold for just 24 hours, and you give up pretty quick. So when that ratepayer, quote unquote, gives up, and I don't mean that in a pejorative manner, they were then having trouble getting DTE to actually acknowledge that they wanted the new meter. So at that point, maybe they'd spend 1, 2, 3 days trying to get to DTE and say, yes, we'll take your digital meter. It would then maybe be 1, 2, or 3 days before the digital meter would come out. But when that person came out, oftentimes they would say, we need to have a different person come out to deactivate that meter. That could be another 2 to 3 days. And then after the meter was deactivated, it might be 1, 2, or 3 days before somebody came and did the work at the pole. And so that was one reason why some of these shutoffs took so long to be restored, because instead of DTE coming out and saying, hey, here's already a deactivated meter, we're going to do the pole work on the same day, it was this three-step process. And so the pole process really needs to be looked at in terms of the rules, or we have to acknowledge how long people would be without power.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I mean, obviously, Greg is a wealth of information on it, because he's the one answering the actual phone calls with a lot of these people. And we're getting phone calls from a lot of different areas, because our office has been recognized as somebody that will listen to their issue. And I encourage all the representatives that are here to make sure that they investigate what's actually going on in their respective districts, because this is not unique to the 7th Senate District, obviously. So I want to, first of all, take a little bit of a moment to commend Greg, because he's delved into the details on this significantly, and I appreciate all of his service in this capacity.
Thank you, Senator. I know, as I mentioned earlier, that Representative Cox and Representative Tice have brought to my attention over the holidays that their offices were getting a lot of calls about this. So I don't know if it's limited just to Southeast Michigan or not. Any other questions? Representative Lauer.
So when they do the cutoff at the pole, that's because the meter was blocked or locked in some fashion. Is that what you're telling us?
In the majority of the cases it was, but in some cases, and you know, all these, for me as a staffer, they become a little bit of a he said, she said. And when you hear these cases the first time, you're doing your best to be kind of a neutral arbiter. But in some cases, it appeared there would just be verbal altercations or a DTE. And I want to be clear, Mr. Rodney Cole at DTE has been very helpful to me in trying to expedite power getting turned back on when I've identified somebody who's been without power for 3-5 days. So I don't mean to unnecessarily besmirch DTE here, but we had enough calls from enough constituents where sometimes it just seemed that the DTE staffer, whether they felt they had power, whether they were done with debating the person, they just decided that they wanted to cut it off at the pole, even if there was not a physical lock on the meter. And indeed, a lot of the shutoff notices that people were receiving that were due to AMI issues, when I would investigate that with Rodney and when I would talk to the ratepayer, locks were not on all of those. And many people were getting power turned off even though they did not have locks on their meter. So certainly some of the cuts at the pole were due to locks being at the meter, but if I had to guess, that was maybe just about 50%.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you, Senator. And if we're now ready to cue up that television report from Detroit.
I'm sorry, it's the computer.
Restarting? Okay.
Every time you pause it, so if I can't play it right when I start it, it's going to have to restart it again.
All right. You go ahead and get it fixed.
It'll take like 30 seconds.
Okay. All right. Mr. Millard, I understand you've got a report that compiles several stories regarding this, but if you'll come up and take your seat, and as soon as this clip is ready, we're going to interrupt you and run it. And again, if I could tell the folks who are going to testify, we're most interested today in the cutoff practices, not so much on the specific reason. Are we ready to go? Nope? Okay. Mr. Millard, if you would proceed. And whenever she pushes that button and you hear sound coming out of that thing, please pause and we will listen to the clip.
Chairman Glenn, I would like to inform this committee that DTE had threatened the village of Columbiaville to shut off our electricity for not allowing them to install a smart meter on our office and DPW building. I had made several attempts to contact them to set up an appointment, and instead they would just randomly send employees out to change the meter, in which I refused. On October 16, 2017, I received a letter, the second notice that DTE had made several attempts to change our meter, and in which they could not access. Therefore, they scheduled the village shut-off for October 25th, 2017.
Mr. Millard, may I interrupt you a second? Are you saying they threatened to cut off the village's power?
That's correct.
Oh,
The,
okay.
the DPW and the office building, which would
Okay.
be the town hall. I began leaving messages on October 18, 2017, and on November 1st, 2017, I finally spoke to a person named Brittany after an employee came to install the meter, and I refused because they had not scheduled an appointment. She told me I would be shut off, and I attempted to explain to her that this building houses the controls that monitor our water and a sewer system, and if we had no power, we would not be able to monitor these vital functions in the village. After telling her that, she made it perfectly clear that we were going to be shut off. That is when I scheduled an appointment for November 10th, 2017. Once again, they did not commit to their appointment, so I refused and rescheduled. This went on for several weeks. I was told we could opt out, and I was also told that commercial buildings could not opt out, which was rather confusing. However, on November 15th, 2017, I spoke with Carla to ask her to give me until December 1st to get input from the village residents on the fact that DTE is willing to put them in jeopardy by shutting off the power to control our water and sewer systems. She apparently did not like my comment, and on Sunday, November 18th, they changed the meter. We noticed this on Monday morning, the 19th. The whole point of this is the fact that DTE did not care about the village and our residents and the extent of damage they could have caused by shutting off our power. If you have any questions, please call the village office at 810-793-4411. Sincerely, Denise Baker, Columbiaville Village Clerk. Thank you.
Okay. So I was going to ask what your position was with the village, but you were reading a letter from the village.
That's correct. I received
Okay.
that letter yesterday from Denise.
All right. Any further testimony?
No.
And doesn't look like we have any questions for Mr. Millard. Thank you, sir. We have about 50 minutes. We've got 15 different people who've asked to speak, so I'm going to urge you to limit your comments to 3 or 4 minutes. You got to allow us the opportunity to question you as well, so we're going to try to get everybody in. But Mrs. Ebaugh, are you here? Lori Ebaugh. Lori, if you would please press the red button and share with us what you'd like to this morning.
Good morning. I'm Lori Ebaugh, a representative for the Residential Customer Group, also known as RCG. We're a nonprofit corporation advocating for Michigan's residential electric and gas utility customers. I'm here today to share the threatened shutoff experience of 2 of our members, Lowell and Donna Kitzman, who couldn't attend today because they're out of state. They were threatened with a DTE shutoff in November of 2017. The Kitzmans were originally contacted by DTE in November of 2015 about changing their meter from an analog to an AMI, sometimes called a smart meter. The Kitzmans promptly communicated back to DTE with their concerns about an AMI meter, but received no response for 2 years until they were threatened with a shutoff last fall. Then our members were not even given 10 business days to respond. DTE's letter dated November 11th informed them that they would be shut off on or after December 4th, 2017 if they didn't contact DTE to schedule the meter exchange. Our members immediately wrote and called DTE at the number given on the letter, and they reached the Revenue Management and Protection Department. They were put on hold for 26 minutes. At that point, they were told to call another department, and at that department, they reached only a voicemail. They continued to try that same number for over an hour and eventually left a message requesting a utility customer hearing, and they said that they would call the Michigan Agency for Energy, the MAE, in addition, to speak with a regulation officer. After that, they called once again, and interestingly enough, the phone was picked up, and they spoke with an actual DTE representative. They were told after some time that an email would be sent by yet another DTE department and that their shutoff date would be delayed. They then called the MAE, where they were told that DTE would respond to their MAE inquiry within 10 days. It did take longer than 10 days, but they did finally get that inquiry started, and it's currently under investigation. It's ongoing. This is what the Kitzmans say in their own words. Quote, "As we have relayed to DTE in regard to the threat of shutoff, we are currently out of state and we are in our 80s. This is an investment property for us, and in addition, we have a contract with the tenant who has special needs, and that adds to the seriousness of this matter. The winter season in Michigan also brings with it the very real threat of frozen pipes if the electricity and the heat is turned off. We find this predicament most troubling and upsetting. Why DTE ignored us for the past 2 years and then waits until December and the winter in Michigan to threaten us with disconnecting our power adds to the stress too," unquote. The MPSC rules are very confusing for most people to understand. The letter that the Kitzmans received on November 22nd, 2017, said nothing about their rights to file a complaint or to request a utility customer hearing. Luckily, our members knew that those options would halt the shutoff process until the matter is resolved, and so they are able to do that. Most of the people who have been shut off, and many of the people testifying today, don't know about those MPSC rules. RCG, in addition to working with the Kitzmans, has also been involved with trying to get the MPSC to look into this matter. There's a case right now open. It's with the MPSC. It's 18486. And we also spoke with the MPSC on 2 different occasions regarding these rules. On December 20th of 2016, RCG requested that the Commission would use its authority with the existing rules to temporarily waive the shutoff rules in the public interest and to restore power to those who had been shut off. Our initial concern was due to the winter last year, 2016. The winter weather conditions at that time was 9 degrees and there were gale force winds that were forecast. Our second request was in February of 2017 that the utilities would report to the commission all people being threatened with shutoff and who had been shut off, so that those in authority at the MPSC would have the facts about who was being shut off and for what reason. In conclusion, we requested an investigation into DTE's history of these shutoffs, and that this case, U-18-486, be meaningful and transparent, with the MPSC being required to notify those who have received any type of threatened shutoff letter or notice and those who are actually shut off. The current rules do allow the MPSC to require DTE and Consumers Energy to provide that kind of information to the MPSC, and the MPSC can notify those customers directly. We believe that there may be 20,000 households who are opting out and should also be notified of that investigation to see how they were handled. In my own experience with my own opt-out, and I was not shut off, and this was early on, as my community was one of the very first in Michigan to receive smart meters or AMI. It took 60 days for me to get my opted out meter. And for 60 days, I had to leave my home and find a place that had an analog meter so that I could sleep, because I had found out that my insomnia and my own health problems were caused by the smart meter. So I had no clue of what the rules for Michigan customers are, and we should make that apparent, and the MPSC should be acting in the public interest. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ebaugh. Any questions? Thank you for your testimony. Are we ready to push that button? No? Okay. You said yes or not? Some names that have asked to testify, I believe I recognize from our previous hearings on smart meters, and I wonder if there are those here who have not had an opportunity, either in the 2 previous hearings or today, to address the committee. And sir, have you put a card in? A card? Okay. You did put a card in? I'm sorry? I have a card in. Okay. If you would then please come forward and give us your name, press the red button, and share your testimony. Please hold it to 2 or 3 minutes, if you would. Yeah, when the video, if the video ever starts playing, sir, we will interrupt you so that it can. Sure.
Hello? Can you hear me? Okay. This is my 90-year-old grandmother. She's never been to Lansing before. First time.
Welcome, ma'am. What is her name?
Dolly Reed.
Ms. Reed, welcome to Lansing. And you have the red button on, sir?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm her caregiver. She lives with me. The bill's been in her name since 1947. Never had a problem. Never not paid a bill, never not done anything wrong. They first cut it off on Columbus Day. It took 18 hours to get it back on, first time. They said it was a mistake because what had happened was there was a power outage in our neighborhood also. Fine. I see a little card in the door, fine. They turned the power back on. Then I got a message on Tuesday telling us that it was a mistake. Your power will be shut off by the end of the day at 9 a.m. that morning. On Tuesday, it was the 10th, they said they'll cut the power off. 2.5 weeks later, finally they cut it off again. They cut it off on the 28th of October. We did not have power again until the 14th of November. We don't usually turn our heat on until first week of November, usually. She's a hardy person. We cool down. So we chill down. She's from Kentucky. And we've paid our bill. The only thing we did is lock up our meter. And I was told by DTE that they were going to, if they put a meter on my house, which there's no way in heck they could, because I'm from Southeast Detroit, so I know how to lock things down. I took a lawnmower deck, cut 2 holes in it, put it over the top of it. I put 8 locks on it with truck chain, 14-foot truck chain. I'm not kidding. I've got 5 locks behind it, and I've got 8 locks in front of it. They'd have to blow the house up before they get the damn thing off. So when they told me they cut it off at the pole, fine, they cut it off at the pole. And they said to me, I had many representatives tell me, on that day they cut it off, I called them up on the 28th, said, hey, she's a senior citizen, you cut her power off again, it's cold, you want her to freeze to death? They says, well, you get this meter or she's gonna. And it's like, if I were you, I would get the meter and worry about it later. She's got the beginnings of Alzheimer's. We don't know. Once memories go from your head, they don't come back. I've heard of people, and I'm just hearing, people that have heart problems, who have blood pressure problems, who have diabetes, all that can be managed after the fact. But brain, I was told, we don't care. We don't care about you. They put me on hold. This is their office thing. They told me that was a Saturday. They told me, oh yeah, I was on hold for 2 hours and 45 minutes. I called back and they said, that office is closed today. I had Muzak in my ear for 2.5 hours and I fell asleep twice. And then I called up and they says, oh, that department's closed on the weekend. I don't know who transferred you. But everyone just basically puts their hands up and says, forget it. And I had a friend down in Texas that told me, this is down there, it's illegal to shut off someone's air conditioning because of the health risks. I didn't know that we had a law up here that says after November the 1st, I first heard it here today, because I didn't even know it through the smart meter people, that November, you can't shut off their power. She's a senior citizen, she's 90 years old. I'm 48, she's 90. She said she would rather burn the house down than to get this damn meter. I told them we heated our house with the stove because we have an electric stove, so we have to turn it on with matches. We have to boil water on the stove because you can't use the oven, because the oven now is connected to the electronic part, so you can't use the oven like back in the day when we were kids. You'd open the door and you'd have heat. Can't do that. And Consumers is going to I'm with DTE, Consumers is going to wind up having the same thing with their gas aspect in years to come. But we couldn't turn on the furnace because you got electric starters because you don't want a standing pilot. So we didn't have heat for 2.5 weeks. And then they called me on the Monday before they restored it on the 13th. They said, are you going to take our meter? And it's like a bully saying, excuse me, you're going to take our meter now? We put you in the cold for 2.5 weeks. Are you going to take it now? I said, no. Didn't hear nothing back from them. Said, you got our answer. They harassed us for about 2.5 weeks with robocalls and everything else. And finally they said, well, we'll close the case. And I'm like, okay, fine. Said, leave the meter off. Goodbye. We'll burn wood. We'll do whatever we have to do. We'll get through the winter. She said she's going to get through the winter. That Tuesday, I walked by the refrigerator. All of a sudden, I hear some noise. It's the compressor going off. And I'm like, I open the door, and I'm like, power's back on. How the heck did that happen? We didn't have any food in the refrigerator, but hey, the thing is that DTE should not be able to get away with any of this crap. She's a 90-year-old person. Where is this law? I didn't even feel in coming up here because realistically, I've never talked to a legislator because it doesn't, most of the time, nothing works. You might as well just talk to the air because DTE, I talked to dozens of people and they said basically, they sent you this they have a red flag number, basically. They put a red flag on your account and you could only talk to this 841 number. And they say, do you want the meter or not? Which meter do you want? Do you want the one that doesn't have the radio in it or the other one? And I said, I don't want either. And they says, well, you don't have that choice. I thought this was America. I thought we had a choice. She's been a DTE customer since 1947. She doesn't pay a lot, but what she pays it every month. She's on budget. And it's just terrible because basically DTE told me that if they did get a meter on my house, which they never will, they said our meters are only rated for 5 years. The analog meters, they say we're only for 5 years. I'm like, excuse me, I've never heard of one dying. My house is 42 years old, and that's the original meter that was installed in 1972. And they said, no, they only last for 5 years. I'm like, you're out of your mind.
Wally, we want to provide time for everybody
Yes,
else that's
I know.
come.
Thank you.
And appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
And again, ma'am, welcome to Lansing.
She's hard of hearing.
Okay.
He says, welcome to Lansing.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Come on.
Janine Deal has put in a card and says she only needs 2 minutes. Janine, have you testified before on this issue? Then let's give somebody. How about Robert Stang? Is it Stang? Staino. Okay. And Robert, have you testified before on?
I have not, but it's not regarding being cut off, so I don't know if I get the opportunity.
What is it about?
It's what happens after you want to opt back in after opt out.
So, okay, well, let's hear your testimony.
Okay. Rob Staino, I'm from Romulus, Michigan. So I've been.
Just a second, sir. Our clerk wants to tell the lady with the computer something.
Aaron's back in the back.
Aaron is back in the back. Apparently that is relevant information. Mr. Staino, if you would please proceed.
The information that I want to give is that I was opt out. And so when you opt out, you get the 2 labels on your meters because we have the interruptible one for the air conditioner. So there was 2 labels saying that the radio was off. I did have a meter that measures the EMF. I measured that I was still getting it out of meters that were supposedly radio off. So I said, I'm just blowing $9.95 per month. I'm going to go back to radio on, opting back in. Called up DTE. They said that their employee would come out, turn the antennas back on. So the day that he came out, he's carrying 2 boxes. And I said, no, sir, I'm just radio back on. I'm not new meters. I don't want to pay for anything new. And he said, no, but that's what we do. Okay, so you're gonna have your meters back on, but we're gonna put these 2 new ones in place. So the old ones that they're taking out were manufactured in 2014, and the new ones that they put on were manufactured in 2016. So I'm hoping that I'm not going to pay through this in some kind of pass-through rate increase in the future. But he assured me that I'm not paying for these 2 new meters. Okay. The thereafter thing is now I don't have somebody coming on my property to read meters. Well, 3 weeks later, I got somebody coming on the property. They want to read meters. I said, no, sir, I opted out. I have 2 new meters. I will show you that I have no labels on them saying radio's off. I'm paying to have it done remotely. He insisted he was there to do this. I said, listen, I'm going to show you that there's no labels on the meters. Invited him inside, put my fingers over the readout, and he's trying to read what the readout is still. I said, sir, you're not going to read that. I'm just showing you that there's no labels on my new meters. And you go back and you tell your higher-ups or whoever that you're dealing with somebody that should be off of a list now. Well, I was surprised that yesterday morning with a nice little snow track that I got somebody that looks like DTE coming on the property, going into the breezeway and going back out, and he's reading the meter. So
you have a smart meter and he's still coming to read it?
He's still coming to read it.
Okay.
So that's my concern, that they don't know. And I hate calling them up because I got to spend a half an hour on the phone for simple questions that should be their responsibility to know their program.
Okay.
And I am going to test these meters again to see if I'm getting the same amount of RF as the previous ones. My tinnitus in my ears has not gone away. And I have other stories I could tell about people with pacemakers that are not here anymore, things like that. I'm for choice. We're in a republic. We should have choices. I know we only have one electrical company servicing us, but this isn't right. We should at least have the choice of having an analog meter. I don't think it's that big of a issue. The small majority of the people that are engaged in this, they should have these meters, health-wise and other financial reasons. That's my testimony. Thank you very much.
Mr. Staino, thank you for your testimony. Don't have any questions listed. Who do we have that's put in a card who's actually been cut off? Okay, ma'am, what's your name?
Sheila Pomeranski.
Okay, Sheila, why don't you come forward, please?
Do you want me to try playing this? Because I think it'll.
Yeah, go for it.
I did bring some documentation just for reference.
A showdown tonight between an elderly woman in Lincoln Park and DTE. The company shut off her power because she stopped them from installing those new smart meters. 7 Action News reporter Curtis Jackson joins us live from Lincoln Park with what this is all about. Curtis.
Well, DTE customers can pay $10 to opt out of that new smart meter program, but it still lights out for a Lincoln Park woman who fought back.
What do you think about this happening to you?
It's pretty sorry. It's a sorry deal.
That's how Olga Pusti feels about what happened to her the day after her 92nd birthday.
And she said, my power is off. And I said, all right, well, maybe others' power is off too. And she says, I'll bet it's over the smart meter.
Pusti had a lock put on her meter to keep DTE from installing the new device.
I don't trust them. I don't.
That's because Pusti and her family are longtime naturopaths. They avoid conventional medicine and vaccines. They say the new smart and digital meters being installed violate their beliefs.
You know, there are different kinds of people in this world. We're all naturopaths. We don't believe in all these signals and things. These are totally unhealthy for you. So where are our rights?
DTE says they warned Pusti 4 times to remove the lock and were forced to shut off her power when she didn't do it. She's legally blind, hard of hearing, and is a severe asthmatic. She's also been a loyal customer of DTE since 1951 and doesn't understand why they can't make an exception.
All I can say is, this the way they treat me? I pay all my bills. I lived here since 51.
This hurts you.
Nobody has to chase me for money, for bills.
We received a statement from DTE tonight. It says in part, DTE confirmed the status of a lock on her meter, which is illegal under Michigan law, and notified Mrs. Pusti of the need to remove that lock. With the device still in place today, after multiple notifications, DTE had to act in the best interest of the customer and the community by turning off her power. Now, DTE won a Michigan court battle which says that it can give customers the option with that $10 of opting out of the smart meter program. But the Pusti concern is this: that new meter will still involve some sort of digital notification, which she does not feel comfortable with. She simply wants to keep the old meter on her house. And right now, DTE says there is no exception that will allow that to happen. We're live downtown. Curtis Jackson, 7 Action News.
Thank you very much. And ma'am, what is your name?
Dakota.
Dakota, thank you very much for making that work. And Sheila, if you would please proceed.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. I'm Sheila Pomeranski from Shelby Township, and I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to share the journey and hardships that were placed on my family regarding DTE and their deployment of the advanced metering or smart meters. And my hope is to provide a face and a story from one of the many utility customers who have been ignored, threatened, and had their electricity shut off, even with significant attempts to avoid that situation. I don't know if all the documentation got got passed around. If everybody got a package, please do not be overwhelmed by the amount that's in that package. I have a summary timeline on top that I can go through very, very quickly, and there's some supporting documentation behind there that you can look at your convenience. But what I'd like to do is just sort of share our story and our journey to give you an idea of what has transpired between my family activity with DTE, the Michigan Public Service Commission, and the Michigan Agency for Energy. So round about 7/28 of 2014, we received our first letter from DTE stating, and I'm just going to kind of go through this timeline that you have in front of you. Our initial letter announcing that they were upcoming installation of the advanced metering systems. About 2 weeks later, we get another letter from DTE stating that they attempted to gain access, and access was refused. Now, I had 2 meters for electricity. I had an analog for interruptible air conditioning, and I already had a digital that had been placed on my home in 2010, and both of these were locked up at the time. So again, 8/11, they attempted to gain access and was refused. Now, several months later, 2/18 of 2015, I sent a letter, or my family sent a letter to DTE, to the advanced metering team, stating that there were health issues in our household. These were reported, in particular, a cancer diagnosis, and we wanted to make them aware of that, and we requested a need for analog meters based on that, and asked for them to start communications in good faith. We were looking for some sort of written verification. Yes, you've heard our concern, and let's begin some sort of communication process as to what the procedure might be. Our meter was locked, and the reason we locked it was due to some health issues within our household, and we were waiting for communications from DTE. We were beginning the communications process to say what are any options or accommodations to this medical situation. DTE never responded. About 9 months later, 9/22 of 15, we get another letter from DTE. This is what I'm referring to as threatening letter number 1. It is my understanding that this committee is listening to testimony about whether you've been threatened or shut off your electricity, so I'm just trying to make it as simple as possible. Threatening letter number 1 to indicate that a locked meter is now in unsafe condition. To prevent interruption of service, please remove the locking device. In the additional comments, it was kind of news to us that all of a sudden this is an unsafe condition after they've known about this for quite some time. So if this was a safety issue, why had this not been communicated in over a year? I wanted to do my due diligence. I didn't want to put my family at risk if there was a safety issue, so I reached out to the Shelby Township Police Department. I spoke to the fire chief, James Swinkowski, to determine, is there an unsafe condition that we should be aware of, that we are putting ourselves and our neighbors in jeopardy? And he basically told me that there is no condition that is unsafe using these meters. He told us that are using the locks. He said oftentimes businesses lock their meters in particular to protect their metering equipment. So he says they have a super key, they can get into anything. It's not a safety issue as far as the fire department is concerned. So with that, I then responded to DTE after I got that first threatening letter after doing some of my own investigation. And this went to Joseph McCormick, of the manager of the Advanced Metering Program, and I also copied the House Energy Policy Committee at that time, back in 2015. I highlighted in this letter to DTE that DTE never responded to any communication. We were trying to communicate in good faith. We had our meter locked for health reasons. I questioned why all of a sudden is this a safety issue that was never brought to our attention before. Now it's a safety issue. I also provided the information that I spoke to the Shelby Township Fire Chief, who said it's not a safety issue according to them. I also indicated that at that time, House Bill 4916 was being introduced to install a meter at that time would be financially irresponsible, a waste of time and energy and money until this issue was resolved in terms of the House bill that was being discussed. And again, I requested a written reply so we could understand that we were in good communications, in good faith. We were trying to resolve this with DTE. Again, in the additional comments, DTE never responded. And by the way, these are all certified letters with receipts. That's part of the attachments that are behind this document. So about 15 months later, we get another letter from DTE. I'll call it threatening letter number 2. So 15 months has now passed. I have a safety issue, supposedly. 15 months later have passed, indicating that the locked meter is an unsafe condition and my electric service will be disconnected on or after January 9th, 2017. again, my question is, if this is unsafe, why has now a year and a quarter passed, and we are now just getting another letter threatening for our electricity? If it's safety, I would think they'd want to do something very quickly. So I decided to file a utility service complaint, which I did, in fact, do. So on 1/6 of 2017, I filed a utility complaint with the MPSC. I complained that DTE was not communicating in good faith regarding personal health reasons for locking a meter, and that the complaint that DTE was not providing supportive evidence as to why this was an unsafe condition. Nobody could seem to tell me what this unsafe condition was. The case number is in the additional comments, case number 01484247, and the Michigan Agency for Energy did respond a few days later.
Sheila,
yes.
Let me interrupt you. Out of respect for the others who want to testify, I want you to cut to the chase, if you
Okay,
would, please.
so if you go through this timeline, you are going to see that there are multiple communications where we were reaching out to DTE, the MPSC, many of which were not responded to. But I think I want to go to page 4, if you will. Page 4 is after several different communications back and forth. After all of these communications, we were really trying to communicate in good faith. On 8/23 of 2017, DTE shut off the electricity to our home. My husband was home at the time. And he mentioned we have a medical letter of recommendation requesting a legal provision to opt out of any smart metering devices, and that we were waiting for communications from DTE. He also made them aware that there was a pending MPSC complaint, and they should not be shutting off our electricity with a pending complaint. This was all posted on our home, and that the technicians basically disregarded that information, and they shut off our electricity anyway. All of this was videotaped, so we did remove the locking devices. We specifically and called DTE to restore our electricity very quickly. We did not want a smart meter. We didn't care if it was with or without transmitting. We chose to have electricity. So we never chose to have a smart meter, but they in fact put one on in order to give us electricity, and they gave us one with the opt-out. Interestingly enough, and that was they cut off the electricity on the 23rd. On the 24th, they came and they replaced one digital meter with replaced one digital meter. I mentioned we had a digital meter. They replaced it with a smart meter, and they replaced one analog, which is what we had for our interruptible air conditioning. They attempted to put a second meter, smart meter, on for my air conditioning. I said very strongly, I do not want a second smart meter. The
Sheila,
technician.
could you give us in one sentence, encapsulate how you feel about the experience you had over this issue?
I can.
And then I'm going to let other folks testify.
Okay. All right. May I just give my closing remarks?
Depending on how long they are.
I apologize. In closing, we believe that we went through extraneous effort to foster communication with DTE, the MPSC, and the MAE to understand and determine any or all other options to smart meter implementation, and we resisted based on documented medical accommodations and need. As you can see, this was purely one-way communication, and these organizations did not have the courtesy to work with us or even communicate with us directly to address our concerns. And the basis of our documented complaint, which was why this was an unsafe condition, we certainly felt ignored and threatened. Additionally, we believe the amount of time it took to restore the electricity, we were 6 days without electricity. I didn't get to tell you, they came while we weren't home and they put a second meter on my air conditioning unit. You'll see that in the timeline. After I vehemently said no, they came and put that on, and that took 23 days to resolve and get that meter off.
They cut you off in January, is that correct? Or
no, August 23rd,
Right.
our electricity was shut down. They put a new meter on the 24th, and on 8/29 we got our electricity back. And there were a lot of things that happened after that. You'll see that in the timeline, of which it's almost to the.
Sheila, thank you for your testimony. We're going to give somebody else an opportunity.
Thank you.
Somebody
Thank
else
you.
that has put a card in whose power has been cut off. Ma'am, and have you testified before on this issue? Mm-hmm. Anybody who has not testified before the committee whose power's been shut off and who has put in the card. What's your name, sir?
I'm Dan Schulte.
Okay, Dan, and I see that you are listed as being associated with the University of Michigan in some fashion. Is that correct?
I graduated.
I'm sorry?
I graduated from the University of
Okay,
Michigan.
so your email address is just because you're a graduate?
That's correct.
Okay.
I have handouts here.
Now, Dan, you asked for 10 minutes. You're not going to get 10 minutes. You're going to get 2 or 3.
I should have enough handouts for everybody. There's some pictures. I don't have enough pictures.
spot. So please limit your testimony to 2 or 3 minutes, and please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today. On October 29th, which was a Sunday, early in the morning, I had people pounding on my door like there was some kind of an emergency. I was in the middle of doing a data transfer to a backup drive on my computer. I went to the door. It was DTE. There were 4 trucks. There was probably 8 people. They were milling around my yard. My neighbors were concerned about it. They came over and talked to me later. Man came to my door and said, we're here to put a smart meter on your house. I said, will that cut my power off? He says, yes, it will. I said, I'm transferring data from one hard drive to another. I says, you can't stop it right now. It says, do not shut off computer. He says, too bad, we're going to do it. He had mentioned that they're going to be in the neighborhood doing other homes. I said, can you go to another home and come back? He says, no, you got a choice. Either let us do it now or we cut off your power. So I thought, well, either way they're going to cut my power. I might as well have them put the smart meters on. So I allowed them to put the smart meters on. I had 2, a regular and an interruptible one. They set the meters on the ground. I picked one up and said, I'd like to keep one. They said, well, you can't keep it. I said, this meter's been in this house since 1952 when it was built. He goes, you can't have it. We argued back and forth about it politely. I mean, it was not a violent or accelerated argument. We just debated. He goes, you know what, we're leaving. I said, okay. And he said, then we're cutting your wires. I said, if you're cutting my wires because of this meter, take it. It isn't that important. He goes, nope, too late. We're cutting your wires. I had smart meters on my house. They were functional. They were operating. They were registering usage of electricity. They all left. They were gone for 10 minutes. They went to the trouble to come back 10 minutes later, the same exact people, and go in my backyard and take a lopper and snip the wires at the pole. And they laughed about it, and they thought it was funny. And that's the kind of monster you're dealing with now. They don't have to answer to anybody, and they know it. And that has to change. I mean, these people are out of hand. And I called DTE all day that day. They kept saying, we have no idea. We're backed up on fixing meters and lines. I said, why would you cut a line if you're already backed up? Why would you create more work? You had the meters on my house. All day Sunday, all day Monday, no meter. I'm on a sump. I've got a bucket bail in my sump. My house is cold. Finally, on Tuesday, I drive down to DTE headquarters. The first thing they tell me is, sir, this place is not for customers. You need to leave. I said, well, I need to talk to somebody. And they were going to throw me out, and then one of the more benevolent security guards says, let me see if I can find somebody for you. And they did. I waited an hour and a half. Finally, a lady came down into the lobby and spoke with me and told me, we'll put your power on by the end of the day today. I said, I shouldn't have had to come down here to get my power turned back on, and you shouldn't have cut it off in the first place. But I thought it's useless to argue with her, so I left. I filed a complaint with the MPSC. DTE told the MPSC that they restored the power on the same day they cut the wires, which was an outright lie. They cannot be trusted, and they are bullies. They're out of hand. And you should know this by now. I mean, you've heard enough testimony. We shouldn't even need to be here today. At this point, you should put the clamps on that company because they are way out of hand, and there's nowhere else to go. They're a monopoly, and we all know it. So I'm asking you to really stand up for the voters here.
Dan, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Anybody else who's got a card in whose power has been cut off and has not testified before the committee in the past? Ma'am in the red coat there, if you would please come forward. What is your name, please?
Jody and my husband Jeff. Can he come up too?
Jody and Jeff?
He talks
Yep.
a lot less than me.
Is it Jody
but-
White?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
So, honey, come on, because I got
Jeff.
the evidence. He's doing the talking.
Great. Please proceed, Jody.
Well, real quickly though, I do want to pass this out. It says, "Let the House reps cast their vote." Gary Glenn, Chairman, please make a motion today to discharge the meter choice House Bill 4220 from the Energy Policy Committee in order for the elected 110 House reps to cast their votes as a republic for which we stand. We, the people, stand. We are not a democracy, but if the House votes say yes, we'll do it. The voters put representatives in their House seats for a purpose. Meter choice is an easy vote. Please stand up and vote on behalf of the people and not the big company. So that's what I'm going to pass out to everybody.
Okay, let's make this brief and concise. You heard the gentleman before us. Ratepayer White at 8385 Norris Street, 20 days without power. We don't have a lock on our meter. We did lose power on October 9th. It was quite a catastrophe for the family. We did get a meter back on October 20th. Didn't get power till October 27th. It was 20 days. We always paid our bills. And just as the gentleman said before us, you guys got to clamp down on these guys. And I just want to make it that brief and concise. And I want to thank Senator Colbeck and his group for helping us out to get power back on, or I think they would have punished us even longer. And it was 5 years that they told us I had meter choice. Didn't think they would come out and do that kind of a drastic situation where they cut our power off at the pole. The wires are standing there, but that's enough.
Okay, and it's only been 32 seconds, so thank you. So for less than 30 seconds, I have the camera, I have everything documented. I have a DTE guy saying that he's on a cut crew. I did file a police report. Westland Police, thank you, is trying to investigate who is the man that cut my pole. There is a public act from 1931 that says that there's a $5,000 consequence for tampering in Penal Code Section 750 Act 328 of 1931. They don't have the right to cut. We're real estate agents. We bought land. On the land was a house. On the house was meters. And then through our charter, we're given power. Thank you, Jesus. We love that. But at the end of the day, we don't, I don't come home from work without power. So I think that it was very rude. And I thank you for this opportunity.
All right.
Thank you for your testimony. Anybody who has not testified before the committee before, power has been cut off and you've put in a card. Have you testified before the committee before, ever? Nope. Come on up. Tell me your name, please.
My name is Georgetta Livingstone.
Livingston?
Livingstone.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
I just want to say, I'll summarize very quickly, as best I can. I'm a very educated person, and you will understand why I'm making this statement. I earned 2 master's degrees in engineering, mechanical and structural, and a PhD in structural engineering. I taught mechanical engineering courses for 14 years. One of the courses I was asked to teach was electromagnetic waves. In 2011, DTE came with deceptive marketing statements about their new metering system. I knew nothing, I never heard about this, so everything you hear now comes from my personal experience. So they installed the smart meter. I didn't know I have a choice to say no. Immediately the bill almost doubled. I called them, they talk you down very ruthlessly. You have no choice, keep paying. Several months later I got very ill. 90% of my skin turned into rash-like, very extremely itching. And then gradually was changing in patches of burned skin here and there, palpitation, sleepless night, anxiety. I thought I'm losing my mind and I'm losing my health very, very quickly. I have a medical doctor in my family. I come from a very educated family, PhDs in electrical engineering and other electrical engineering. I called DTE, they refuse to do anything about it. They deny the condition. And through medical reports, I began to it opened up my mind, and I began to do a research, and I found out there is no other reason, just radiation. I was finally diagnosed.
Dr. Livingston, I forgive me, I would like to direct your testimony to your experience of having your power cut off.
Exactly. So I was diagnosed with electrohypersensitivity. DTE refused. There was a lengthy process trying to ask them to return the functional and operational analog meter. They ignore you completely, and I gave them a term limit. I have to protect my health and my household. Otherwise, I will have to do it myself. So I hired the electrician, replace the smart meter with an analog meter. Then I got threatening calls from Joseph, DTE guy, Joseph, I forgot his name now. McCormick, Joseph McCormick, that they are going to cut off my power if I don't accept their meter. I said, I do accept your meter, providing that it doesn't emit electromagnetic waves, it doesn't monitor activity in your home, it doesn't cause fire. Please bring it. Instead, they cut off my power. So we built a house, we have no water, no heat. This was in July 2014. Between July 2014 and February 2015, that's the only source I use for light, morning and evening. I had to go to Kroger to bathroom because we cannot flush the toilet. I had to go to neighbor to take showers. And then in desperation, I decided to put an alternative system, solar, wind turbine, and for non-wind and non-sun, a solar backup generator. The homeowner association contacted DTE. DTE incited them, and they began to harass me, bully beyond description. Unbelievable. They began to fine me $300 to $500 per day for every surviving step I was taking to survive. And finally, they filed a lawsuit against me. When you are fined with $300 to $500 per day, it's adding up very quickly. Asking the court to foreclose my home and to force me to remove all the improvement. And it's a phony violation. There's no single violation of the bylaws. It's still in court. They want to remove the generator. They came Sunday with a whole big commotion team to measure the sound level of the generator along the perimeter. My generator is generating 46 to 52 decibel. If you understand what this is, the burners in the furnace burners generate 65 decibels. The spying neighbor who called police on me and continue this saga, his air conditioning is 80 decibel. In my master bedroom, I recorded 58 decibels. So I am just brought into, I'm treated as a criminal of the criminals because I chose life. I'm coerced to die by radiation, by freezing, or by asphyxiation, and I chose to live in consideration for the neighbors. There is no violation of Michigan noise ordinance. The neighbor, next door neighbor, does not even hear it, and I want to live, but I am forced to die. So I would like to urge you, you are human beings before being representative. You heard so many terrible stories. It is your only opportunity to change the wrong with something good. And you have a conscience too. You never know what tomorrow will happen. So I plead in the name of your loved one, of your own, in the name of the one who created all of us, choose what's right and let us have a choice. Let me live and people like me.
Dr. Livingstone, thank you for your testimony. We're going to have time for one more. Janine Deal, and you say you need 2 minutes. That's what we have left.
Okay. I'll be even quicker than that. We have Semco Energy for Natural Gas Service. Semco is a monopoly, or is a Canadian company with a monopoly market in Michigan, market area in Michigan. I had a horrible reaction, physical reaction, to their transmitting meters, which they actually did not give me the entire truth about when they first installed them.
Janine, please reserve your comments to the experience of being cut off.
Okay, and then we called them out, and the regional operations manager came out, and I asked him to remove the meter and replace it with a non-transmitting meter. He very politely said, I can remove the meter right now and shut off your natural gas service. And that was the only option. At least DTE and Consumers Energy allow you an opt-out. Semco Energy, a Canadian company with a monopoly market area in Michigan, gives their customers absolutely no choice. And recently, there was a Semco employee in the yard looking for gas leaks, and he told me that a lot of people are calling with the same health issues as I've had, but they don't care. Thank you.
Janine, thank you for your testimony. As I've already indicated, on January 30th, we're going to have a second crack at this issue because DTE has requested to wait until then for them to respond. My apologies to Kathleen Roberts, to Pamela, to William Redfield, to Deanna Hilbers, Raymond Kirchner, Joan Johnson, and Anita Greski, who are here today and had asked to testify. If I understand from the representative from DTE that they will not need the entire 90 minutes on January 30th, so if those of you who did not get to testify today would like to come do so on the 30th, happy to have you back. My apology, we couldn't get to you today. And just for the record, we're going to have a substitute for House Bill 4220 that attempts to move it along, that basically will say, if, as Consumers currently allows customers to do, you self-read. Consumers sends out a postcard. It's on their website. They tell you how to do it. If you, I'm not going to take any testimony, if you simply take a cell phone shot of your meter and email it to them, they accept that. And so the substitute for House Bill 4220 is going to say that if you self-read, then you're exempt. You don't have to have the smart meter. If you get an analog meter and refuse to self-read, then you would have to pay whatever the Public Service Commission says you have to pay, which right now is what, $75 first month, $90 whatever, and $10 a month. So
How can we get the analog meter back if that happens?
well, we'll see. I think that's covered in the legislation. But just be aware, we're going to have a substitute in an attempt to move it down the road, and appreciate your attendance here today. I need a motion to excuse absent members. Representative Lisinski so moves. Without objection, so ordered. Anything else we need to do, Mr. Clerk? Okay. House Energy Policy Committee is adjourned.
I read my own meter, but they still charge me the $10.